Hey guys, Josh from SoccerReviewsForYou.com, bringing you an unboxing plus on-feet video of the Made in Japan Mizuno Morelia Neo in the white and black colorway. Now inside the box they do include a shoe bag with the shoes themselves. You can see it's got your little pull tab at the top, your Mizuno branding on the front, and the bag is of course white in color. Nothing too crazy about that. And other than that, all you're going to find inside the box are the shoes themselves. So we'll get these guys out of the box really quickly. And if you guys could take a second to leave a like on the video, it would be greatly appreciated. So here is a look at the Made in Japan version of the Mizuno Morelia Neo. And the reason why I stress Made in Japan is because for those that are unfamiliar with Mizuno products, they have two versions of the Morelia Neo as well as the Morelia. A standard variation of the Morelia Neo, which I've reviewed several times on my channel. If you want more info, I'll leave an annotation on screen to my playtest video. That standard version of the Morelia Neo has a retail price of $225 US, whereas this one right here, the Made in Japan version, has a retail price of $280 US. So it's an extra $55 for being made in Japan, and from what I've been told, there are some pretty significant differences in terms of build quality and materials between the standard variation, which is already very good, and the Made in Japan version, which is supposed to be ultra premium, what the professionals are getting. So in today's video, we're going to take a look at what those exact differences are, doing a side-by-side comparison between the Made in Japan and the standard Morelia Neo. And with that being said, let's get right into the video. To start things off, let's talk about the colorway and visuals of the Made in Japan Morelia Neo. Now this version of the Neo, as far as I know, is only available in the white and black colorway, at least in North America. So you have a mainly white base, some of which is kangaroo leather, the rest is of course synthetic. Obviously a very clean, kind of a pearl white in person. And then of course you have your black detailing in the form of your Mizuno branding on both the lateral and medial side of the shoe. And then the entire outsole is also black in color, white studs, little red detail there on the bottom. You have your little red detail on the external heel counter, and then your Morelia Neo branding right here in gold, blue, and red on the very back. On the tongue, you will notice that it does say Mizuno professional model, and it actually does say Made in Japan. So from a distance, if you couldn't tell already, that is really one of the major distinctions between the standard versions and the Made in Japan variation. The other distinction is that this little piece at the back comes up a little bit higher and is also slightly wider, but that's one of those things that you really have to know your shoes to really recognize out there on the field. But for the most part, you're going to have a hard time telling apart a standard Morelia Neo and a Made in Japan Morelia Neo, especially from a distance. But that's pretty much it as far as the colorway is concerned. Let me know what you guys think of the overall visuals. And with that being said, let's get on to the tech specs so we can know more about the overall performance. So, on the table in front of me, we have the standard Morelia Neo with a retail price of $225 in blue and yellow, and we have the $280 Made in Japan Morelia Neo in white and black. You can see side by side, they appear to be very, very similar, aside from obviously them being different colorways. Now, starting off with the upper, on the standard Morelia Neo, you have kangaroo leather at the front. The seam is right here, goes all the way through the forefoot and toe box area, then cuts off at this point right there. It is kangaroo leather, and the quality is very, very good. I have no complaints with it whatsoever. And then obviously from the leather portion back, you have a thinner synthetic material. You can get an idea of the thickness right there. And you have, like I said, two very kind of high contrast materials. You have a more padded, fairly thin kangaroo leather upper at the front, and then an ultra thin, no extra padding synthetic material through the rest of the shoe. On the Made in Japan Morelia Neo, the kangaroo leather does appear to be a little bit thicker, and as far as the quality is concerned, I am going to argue that it is a little bit nicer. Is it so much nicer to the point where you're going to notice a major difference in terms of touch on the ball? That's something that I don't want to definitively say yes or no until I've actually worn the shoe. But in terms of comfort, right out of the box, this definitely is a nicer, softer, higher quality kangaroo leather. You can see that the stitching pattern is also different between both of these two shoes. Something that I thought was a little bit interesting, and also something I was not expecting, is that the leather actually does extend a little bit farther on the Made in Japan version in comparison to the standard variation. It's not a lot of extra leather, but you can see the seam cuts off right about here, all the way through the forefoot and toe box, and then cuts off again a little bit further even on the medial side. So you do get a touch more higher quality leather on the Made in Japan version of the Morelia Neo, while the from the midfoot back, you have pretty much the exact same synthetic. There's a different liner, which I'll show you guys in just a second, but again, it feels very, very similar. It's the same thickness, no extra padding whatsoever, and for the most part, other than just being slightly softer and slightly more leather at the front of the shoe, there isn't a major difference between the two. The tongue on both models is still synthetic. In the bottom portion, you can see this has more of a kind of heavy-duty mesh pattern, whereas this one has a slightly finer mesh pattern. So you can see there is a slight difference between the two variations of mesh that they've used on both of these two shoes. Again, just a small difference that I noticed, not one that's going to have any impact on the overall performance. You're also going to notice on the Mizuno branding, you have a kind of a texturing on the Mizuno logo on the Made in Japan variation, where the Mizuno branding on the standard Morelia Neo is completely smooth. So another small visual difference between the two when you have them side by side. Moving on to the back portion, like I mentioned earlier, you can see that this little piece right here is significantly wider, and it comes up slightly higher on the Made in Japan version in comparison to the standard, which I think is going to be a lot more comfortable in the long run. But to me, the biggest difference between these two shoes is going to be the overall comfort, and that comes down to the heel liner. You can see on the inside of the shoe, you do have a nice suede heel liner on the standard Morelia Neo, but you can see that it only covers the very back, and then it cuts off on the sides. Then you have this kind of almost nylon-like lining material, and like I said, there isn't a lot of extra padding back here. They've really tried to keep it as lightweight as possible. With the Made in Japan version, here I'll actually grab this one that's a little bit more opened up, you can see that you have that same ultra soft, I would say this is even softer suede material on the inside. It extends all the way around, and there is probably quadruple the amount of padding on the inside. So in terms of comfort, especially from right out of the box, the Made in Japan version has a much nicer heel lining in comparison to the standard variation. It's wider at the top, and like I said, there's a ton of extra padding in here. Extremely comfortable fit from right out of the box. It even extends a little bit further down the side. Even on the ankle collar area, you even have that little bit of extra padding. And then again, you have a gold kind of nylon lining material as opposed to black. Feels pretty much the same to me. So again, in terms of overall comfort, that part of the shoe I wouldn't say is very different at all. As far as the insole is concerned, it's exactly the same on both versions, so I'm only going to show you one. This is from the Made in Japan version, just for those that are wondering. You can see it features your Morelia Neo branding right there, and just like the standard Morelia Neo, it does have that kind of reverse side of Velcro gritty pattern to it, similar to what we're seeing on the Predator Instinct models in their heel liner, but this is obviously across the surface of the insole. It's there to grip your sock and prevent your foot from sliding around on the inside of the shoe. It does that very, very well, and it's a good little idea, a good little innovation from Mizuno on the Morelia Neo model. And then you have a pretty good layer of foam as well, decent thickness, and pretty good step-in comfort overall. Moving on to the outsole, you're really not going to find a difference between both of these two shoes. I'll just give you guys a quick glance at the standard variation. So it's a one-piece heel counter and sole plate, kind of very similar to the F50 Adizero Sprint frame, but at the same time a little bit different. As far as materials go, it could be slightly different material. Again, it's hard to say just when you have them in your hand, but until you wear them, that's really when you're going to get a judgment as to whether or not there is a major difference between the two. But you can see visually they're the exact same shape, the exact same dimensions. These are, of course, both a size 9 US. So side by side, there's really no difference between the two at all, other than, again, the colorway. As far as the stud pattern is concerned, you do get the exact same Morelia Neo stud pattern, which is kind of a modern take on what you would get with the more classic Mizuno Morelia, where you have conical studs on both the forefoot as well as in the heel. And again, the overall traction that you're going to get is aggressive, but at the same time fairly subtle, in that you have a good amount of studs. They have that slightly kind of angled positioning to them, so they dig in quite well. It's a very stable stud pattern, plenty of traction when pushing off, but still that ability to twist and turn when planted. So that's pretty much it as far as the side-by-side comparison is concerned. Again, the major differences are the quality of the leather, in that the Made in Japan one is a little bit nicer. You get slightly more leather on the Made in Japan variation. The heel liner is, in my opinion, 10 times better on the Made in Japan version. That little tab at the back is slightly wider as well, and then you have a slightly different heel liner. But other than that, there aren't a ton of major differences between both of these two shoes in terms of what's going to impact actual performance. So whether or not the Made in Japan version is worth that extra $55, that's something you have to determine for yourself, or you could just wait for my full written review once I've had an opportunity to try these out and determine whether or not I actually notice much of a difference between these two models. But that's it as far as performance is concerned, and next we'll move on to a quick weigh-in so we can see if there's any difference between these two shoes when it comes to weight. In terms of weight, the Mizuno Morelia Neo is about being as light as possible, so I was kind of curious to see whether or not there would be a major weight difference between the two, considering this one does have slightly thicker kangaroo leather and a much more significant heel liner on the inside of the shoe. So I'm going to weigh both pairs side by side in real time. Keep in mind these are both in brand new condition and both in a size 9 US. We'll start off with the standard Morelia Neo, and you can see that these guys weigh in at 6.9 ounces, so just below the 7 ounce mark, and again, nice and light if that's what you're looking for. We'll take that off the scale and we'll throw on the Made in Japan version, and you can see that these weigh in at 6.8 ounces, so they're somehow 0.1 ounces lighter than the standard variation, which is not a significant amount of weight at all. You're not going to notice a difference between these two shoes on feet when it comes to weight, but it's pretty impressive that this does feature a slightly thicker, better quality kangaroo leather upper and a much more comfortable heel liner on the inside of the shoe, but somehow manages to be even a little bit lighter than the standard Morelia Neo. I'm not sure what the reasoning is. I couldn't tell you why this shoe is lighter than this one, but I have to say I am slightly impressed. So again, if you were kind of debating between both of these two shoes, I don't think that weight should be the deciding factor, but just know that for all the extras that you get on the Made in Japan version, it's not increasing the weight of the shoe. In fact, it's decreasing it. Alright, here's a look at the Made in Japan Morelia Neos on feet, and from out of the box, these are extremely comfortable. If you want to compare it directly to the standard Morelia Neo, the only major difference between both of these two shoes is the heel liner in the Made in Japan version. It's significantly more padded, you get more suede across the entire heel. For that reason, it's a lot more comfortable and seems to do a better job of locking your heel in place as well. Is it better than the standard Morelia Neo? Yes. But does that make the heel liner on the standard Morelia Neo bad? Absolutely not. But if I'm comparing the two directly and you want to know what is the more comfortable option, it definitely is the Made in Japan version. Other than that though, the fit in the midfoot, the toe box, and the forefoot even is pretty much the same. Yes, the leather is a little bit better quality on the Made in Japan version, but again, is it super noticeable on feet? Honestly, not really. I mean, that is something that I say lightly because I haven't actually broken the shoes in yet. But just from right out of the box, there isn't a major difference in feel between both of these two shoes, other than, of course, the heel liner. As far as the overall comfort is concerned, they're very comfortable. You're going to get a decent flexibility from the sole plate. Obviously, the kangaroo leather at the front of the shoe is relatively soft, and because the synthetic material is also pretty thin, there's really no stiffness to this shoe at all. As far as the fit goes, it is a tighter fitting shoe, so if you do have relatively wide feet, it's probably best to stay away. Of course, you will get some stretch in the forefoot and toe box area because it is a natural kangaroo leather, where the midfoot area will more or less maintain its shape as it fits from right out of the box. So again, if you have wide feet, it's probably best to stay away from these ultra lightweight options. As far as sizing is concerned, I'm wearing my usual size 9 US, and the fit in the length is absolutely perfect. The sizing runs the same whether you buy the standard Morelia Neo or the Made in Japan version, so please keep that in mind. And if you are interested in a pair of Morelia Neos, I would strongly recommend going true to size for the best possible fit. Alright guys, that's it for my unboxing of the Made in Japan Morelia Neo. I'm actually pretty excited to try these out. I like the Morelia Neo, and I'm curious to see, after breaking these in and wearing them in for a little while, if I'm going to notice any kind of actual difference between the standard pair and the Made in Japan version. As I mentioned, I definitely do feel like the heel liner is significantly more comfortable if you're comparing the two directly, but again, the Morelia Neo, the standard version, is not uncomfortable by any means. Just side by side, I do prefer the feel of the Made in Japan version. So again, out of the box, that's really the only significant difference that I noticed between the two models, and whether or not that's worth the extra $55 at this point in time is something you have to determine for yourself. But overall, I am going to get to wearing these, and I'm excited to do so, and I will of course follow up with my full written review and kind of give you guys a final verdict as to whether or not the Made in Japan Morelia Neo is really worth that extra $55. I honestly think to most people it probably isn't, but if you're an enthusiast and you really want the best of the best in terms of materials and build quality, then yes, the Made in Japan version is definitely a good buy over the standard one. So if you guys are interested in a pair of these for yourself, I would strongly recommend checking out the review page on my website, linked down below in the description. You'll find the high quality images that'll give you some close-up details of this shoe, because there aren't many on the internet, and I'll also leave some buy it now links for this particular shoe if you are interested in a pair for yourself, along with exclusive SR4U coupon codes where you can actually pick it up below its $280 retail price. So be sure to go ahead and check that out if you're interested in a pair for yourself. Other than that though, guys, if you have any questions at all regarding this particular shoe or any suggestions, leave those down below in the comment section and I definitely will get an answer out to you. If you enjoyed today's video, found it helpful and informative, be sure to support it with a like. That would be greatly appreciated. Subscribe for daily videos on all the latest and greatest soccer gear if you haven't already. All of my social media information is down below in the description as well. And other than that, guys, hope you enjoyed today's video, and as always, thanks for watching.